Hi, everyone. I'm sorry to be competing against lunch. I'm sure if you're feeling an urge to go in that direction, but I won't be too long, and I promised not to exceed my 15 minutes, so let me get moving. I'm going to talk about my project, which is called Drowning World. Okay, there we are. Drowning World is my personal, very idiosyncratic attempt to address climate change. It began in 2007 at a point when I was, with two young kids, was becoming increasingly concerned about the kind of future they would be facing when they, in the middle of their lives, in their 40s and their 50s, and what the world might be at that point in their time. And I began to read and think a lot about climate change, and I was very disturbed by the imaging of climate change at that point because I felt it was very remote. A lot of beautiful images of glaciers, of polar bears. It felt very white, very beautiful, very distant and far away. And I wanted to make something, a body of work which was visceral, which showed you who the victims of climate change are and unsettle my viewers and, be some kind of visual alarm call. At the same time, I was experimenting with using this amazing bit of technology, which is older than me. It's a Rodiflex camera. And I was experimenting with kind of portraiture and using this camera. And it sort of clicked. So in 2007, I went and photographed a flood in the north of England. And at the time, I thought I'd be doing some kind of typology of many different kinds of victims of climate change. But when I began to photograph floods, there was something about them which really kind of, I suppose, captivated me. And I was very struck at that point by what I would call a kind of a shared vulnerability that I saw in the people I photographed. And you'll get a sense there of this kind of narrative which was developing. And that's the beginning of a journey for me, which has involved going to floods in 13 different countries, starting with India and the UK in 2007, Haiti in 2008, Pakistan in 2010, Bangladesh, 2011 was Australia and Thailand, 2012 Nigeria, 2013 Germany and the Philippines, 2014 back to India and the UK, 2015 was Brazil, Bangladesh, and the USA, and this year has just been France. So what is developed as the central spine of the project is a series of what I call submerged portraits. And these are kind of quite strange images in many ways because they are done in very hectic environments, but they also are quite conventional portraits with the subjects looking at the camera. It's conventional portraiture, I suppose, in a very, very hectic environment. In putting my work together, I've always struggled to arrange it. I've always struggled to find a way to develop a narrative sequence. And do I arrange it by country, by gender, by groupings? Do you have a sense of the kind of organizing principle that I'm using here? I'll take you through a few of the images. Yeah, exactly. So we're following the descending water levels. And a big part of it is making, as you can see, what I think of as trying to be quite a profound and deep connection with my subjects. And this camera is very much part of it because it's not a camera which I hold in front of me. I hold it like this, and I'm looking down, so it allows me to look at people's expressions, look at their faces, maintain that kind of connection. And just to introduce you to one of the people, this is Florence Abram, who I photographed in Nigeria in 2012. In that context, this is a small town called Igbageni, where half the town had been underwater. I had a set deal where I gave people $30 in exchange for them taking me to their homes and allowing me to photograph and video them. Florence took me to her home, She was a baker. She had a small business. She employed about 25 people, and her ovens and all her flour were destroyed, and she had no insurance. It was devastating for her. About another 30 people made their livings from selling her bread. So it was, devastating for her and the community. And I made this portrait, which I think is one of the most powerful photographs I've ever made. At the end of this session, photographing her, I tried to give her the $30. And she said to me, "I don't want your money. I want you to show people what's happened to me." And I think people often ask me what people get back from this experience and from being photographed. And what I offer is a kind of witnessing of what's happened to them. I'll take you through the rest of this sequence of portraits. So you can see many different countries, many different cultures, many different circumstances, but I'm always trying to make a similar kind of emotional connection in the photographs. So I'm moving a lot quicker than I normally do. There are many stories attached to these. And I always try to, I always present people's identities are very important to me, and so everybody is named in the photographs, except for this photograph. This is the only unnamed person. And when I was photographing in Ghana, in Haiti, I was struggling through the mud, and I saw this boy. He paused for a moment. I took one picture, and he disappeared. And I just only shot one frame of him. And so again, one of my favorite pictures. He feels like a kind of a statue growing out of the mud. And then another narrative that has grown in the project is a series which I call Floodlines. And it emerges out of this kind of desire I have to kind of create very ordered, calm images out of a very chaotic scenario. And there's something about, I suppose, a flood environment where everything is reversed, things are upside down, nowhere's where it's meant to be, that I find kind of really deeply compelling. So this is the series of the floodline images, again, from many different countries, and I'm tracing the line of the floodwater as it moves through personal and public spaces. And as you can see, it's a much more kind of abstract series. Okay, and I'm going to try to tell a very quick story. In Haiti in 2008, there was a terrible series of hurricanes, 4 in a month, devastated the country, very similar to what's happened recently. In the worst of them, the town of Gonaive was devastated. The river Quente burst its banks, flooded the town, about 2,000 people died. It was, at the time, a huge disaster and quite newsworthy. It's kind of forgotten now. And I went there trying to go to Gonaive. But arriving in Haiti, there was no way to get there. The roads were blocked. You couldn't get there by boat. The only way in was in a UN helicopter. I spent 4 days trying to get there. Eventually, I managed to talk my way into the helicopter and arrived and began working. And the town was astonishing. The center of town was like 2 feet under mud. The rest of the town was, underwater. And I got to a little community called, sorry, I'm having a blank on that, but I got to this small community on the outskirts of the town. There was a center for displaced people, which was actually underwater. And these people took me out to their homes, and we began walking through the water. And the rain just began pouring on us. There was a downpour of rain. And I had a leather strap on my Rolleiflex camera, which broke in the water. So my one Rolleiflex camera fell into the water. I dried it off as best I could. We kept on going. An hour later, I was inside someone's house photographing, and my so-called assistant turned around with my backpack on his back and knocked my tripod with the other Rolleiflex into the water. So both my Rolleiflexes had gone into the water. I had a backup digital camera, a 5D Mark I, but I hadn't bought a backup spare battery charger, and my battery charger had broken. And I ran around the UN headquarters trying to find someone with the same battery charger. I couldn't charge that battery. So the only cameras I had were my 2 soaked Rolleiflex cameras. I did my best to dry them out, and this was an astonishing situation to photograph. And as you can see, the camera is essentially a box with a lens. So I thought with no electronics, maybe I can keep on working. So I kept on working for 3 days, put another 40 rolls of film through the camera, and when the film came back, this was the result. All the film was fogged. Depending on the level of humidity, there was water inside the camera, so the humidity had impacted on the film in this sort of way. And at first, I was seriously upset about it. But then I had a realization that there was actually something quite special and different about the impact of the floodwater directly on the film. It was very different to photographing. There was something on another level was happening. And that set off a whole new direction in this project. And when I went to Australia shortly after that, to the floods there, I came across this pile of flood-damaged personal snapshots. And with the impact of what happened to me, and the thinking I'd begun doing about it, I found them really fascinating. And you can see what happens, what the kind of chemical impact of floodwaters on these precious personal items. And that began another journey for me of kind of collecting, in all the floods I've been to, collecting these personal precious items. And I have an archive of about 500 now. Some anonymous, just found amidst the debris, sometimes even floating in water. Some are very linked into personal stories. I'll show you. This is Shirley Armitage. Where are you, Shirley? Okay. So that's Shirley Armitage, who I photographed in Somerset. And as she said to me, that's her 3rd failed marriage. And I had quite a strong experience of kind of meeting Shirley and kind of filming her. And so some images have these kind of deep connections. This is a family who I met in Bangladesh, and again, this is another marriage photograph. And so people have given me these images, and some are anonymous, and they speak, perhaps in a different kind of way, and in some ways quite an emotional, visceral way about the potential damage climate change can do to communal memory for me. You get a sense of them. So these are from 6 different countries, some old, some very recent, some anonymous, some very linked into people who I've engaged with. And this image was found in Tacloban in the Philippines, which experienced the most devastating flood surge ever, killing 8,000 people. And I found this picture amongst the wreckage. I've got no idea if she, is alive or dead, if she survived or not. It was just found amidst, the devastation. You can see that, so these images, I've also started to exhibit them and make really big prints of them. And initially, I thought I needed to crop them and choose kind of little bits to kind of make them mine, to make them kind of making some kind of artistic imposition myself. But that actually didn't work. And what I realized what's most important is actually to show the borders and the edges and to present them actually as real physical objects. So that's how I always show them when I print them. So I'll take you through this narrative. And then kind of one of these ironical twists in life. I began my career in South Africa in the 1980s, and initially was part of a young generation of struggle photographers photographing the fight against apartheid at that point in time. I'd left a box of negatives and transparencies stored in a friend's house, which I'd essentially forgot about and kind of neglected. And they were water damaged. Rain fell on them. Some of my own images were water damaged. And I was, again, just amazed by the results. So these are some of my own photographs taken in the 1980s, which have this quite remarkable and completely unintentional impact of time and mold and water. And I'm going to conclude, bring things to a conclusion, just showing you a 2-minute video, which is the other kind of element of Drowning World, is the video component, and it's grown. And I've made a series of what I call the water chapters, which are, I'll come back in a second, a small chapter for each country. It's a 35-minute video piece. This is a 2-minute trailer. But also, something which I won't be showing now, I'm working on making a 5-screen, multi-channel installation, which I hope will be a very immersive experience for audiences, and I'm just starting work on that now. Great. Thank you very much, everyone.